Hello everyone, this is Scott Stengel and Mike Doe from the Melco Applications team. Today we're going to share some tips for digitizing non-polyester threads. Polyester tends to be, of course, the most popular and most widely used, but there's some specialty threads that add a wow factor to your embroidery, and we're going to discuss how to digitize for them and also how to set the machine up to embroider them. So I guess what I see as a big problem with specialty threads is people will take a design that's not digitized for certain non-poly threads, and they'll just try and stuff it into a design, and of course they get tons of thread breaks. The problem with that is, say in the case of metallic, it's a thicker thread. It's far more touchy, and so you got to be careful with it. So I have a customer, my best customer has gold in his logo and it's Christmas, so I'm going to try and get some extra work or wow him or whatever, and I'm going to sub gold metallic for gold in his logo. And they have terrible trouble. The reason is stuff has to be modified for different types of threads. In the case of gold metallic, we need to lighten things up and make sure that we don't have too many layers and things like that. We're going to cover that in the metallic section. But that tends to be the biggest problem. Something has to be digitized for these some of these special threads in order to get them to work.
So, hello everybody. A good analogy that I have on this, Scott, is it's kind of like fuel for vehicles. You can't take diesel fuel and let's take diesel fuel and put that like rayon thread. You can't take and apply rayon thread to a design that was digitized for polyester, is what you're saying, right?
Yes.
So that would be like taking diesel fuel and putting into a gas engine car. It would give you very bad output.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Part of what of course, I started back in '85, and all we had was rayon then. The polyester hadn't really come out. It was pretty bad shape when it first did. But so I sewed rayon for quite a while in production and everything, so I got to use it. And I found like you have to be far more careful with that thread of not packing in the stitches, or you're just going to get nothing but thread breaks. So I see designs that come across here that I analyze that are digitized, and I still think of in terms of rayon, of like when I look at it, oh, this is too tight, this is too dense, there's no way this is going to ever sew, too many layers, and it sews it in polyester. Polyester has, a lot more tensile strength. That's when you pull the thread till it snaps. Polyester is far more, has better tensile strength than rayon, so you can get by with a lot more packed in undesirable areas in the design, shall we say.
So it's more forgiving type of thread.
It's far more forgiving.
Okay.
Rayon seems to be making somewhat of a comeback. So we're going to talk about different types of specialty threads. First of all, we have some help for you on Madeira's website. And so I will go here. They just redid the website. It's pretty cool. So under resources is where we are. So Mike is going to post the web address for you. But you go to madeirausa.com, and then we click on resources off of education, I believe it was. And we end up on this page right here. So if we go down, we can get, here you can see, here's individual specialty threads and how to set up with it. Here's 60 weight, Burmilana, Firefighter, Frosted Matte. We're going to talk about all those.
Nice.
And right over here is, if I click on it, oops, wrong one. That was
It's over to the right under instructional. There you go. That one.
How to set density for various threads. This is a good list. This
now
is
you
like...
need to, I'm sorry, you need to share your screen.
Oh, didn't yet, did I? Sorry.
It's up. There it is.
There we go. All right. So this has kind of a list of each type of their thread and what sort of normal densities as well as needle selections would be desirable for it. So this is a good helper. I would go there, print this out, or download it, print it out, and save it for reference, because this is pretty good. It's a starting point. Everything is going to change based on different fabric types, but it at least gets you in the ballpark so you can get better results off the...
I really like how it explains the needle size as well as the densities. I think that really helps a lot. A tip on needles, get it? Tip and needles. Wow, I'm dad jokes today. I like to take, majority of the time, specialty needles like size 65 needles, or special tips like round ball or light ball. What I like to do is I'll take Sharpie markers, and I'll take, and on the shaft of the needle, I will take and use different colors. And when I take that needle out, instead of throwing a good needle away, even though it's not that expensive, I'll take that needle, make sure that it's got that color on it, and then I have a legend of black equals 7511, red equals 65, sharps, and then I'll just take that needle and stick into the foam of the color palette that the cone's set on, either to the left or to the right. If you can show the machine real quick here.
Switch to the cam.
Thank you. So what I'm talking about is over on either side, either over in here or over in here or up above, you could take and just keep those needles in there.
Oh, like a pin cushion.
Yeah, like a pin, exactly, a pin cushion.
Sorry about this.
And we're just putting everybody back together again, so sorry for that slight delay, but it's a awesome. Good thing. So
yeah, another tip goes way back. Chrome plated needles, because we really didn't have the titanium nitride. There was Teflon, but mainly it was chrome plated needles. We would take the marker and we would use like red for ballpoint and blue for sharp, and we'd put it right where the shank meets the shaft. And some people would claim that when the marker wears off, the needle is shot, because it just goes just enough into the fabric. But anyway, side note there. Okay, so first thread we're going to talk about is going to be Rayon. So I have a design that I digitized forever ago. Rayon, like I said, is where is it?
There we go.
Yeah, no, one of the golf schools.
Is it closed down at the bottom, maybe?
I think because the resolution is low.
Maybe just close all
your
your
screens.
screens.
Just close Design Shop and start her again. Sorry for this, but hey, that's what makes live cool, right?
We change resolutions to make sure it shows up well on web, and it sometimes bites you, so. There we go.
Hey, all right. So here's one I did a while ago for, it's digitized for Rayon thread. There really isn't a lot of difference in digitizing as far as densities and whatnot for Rayon 40 weight versus polyester 40 weight. In fact, a lot of the designs digitized for Rayon just turned into polyester designs when polyester thread became so popular. The most important thing with Rayon is, like I was saying earlier, you can't pack in stitches. You got to be careful and not put too many layers together. Just as you go through the design, be very sensitive of multiple layers, of your stitch lengths, of not too much density, things like that. So let me show you another one. This kind of affects all digitizing, but it is especially important when it comes to Rayon. So here's just some vector shapes that I have, and I'm going to show you, like when it comes to the ray of a sun or any tapered type of column. I'll grab the walk stitch tool. Of course, I would turn on my lock stitches and do all that stuff which we've covered before. But here it is. So let's say that I'm going to walk from here up. I would not walk right to here and start my column right here because I would have a whole lot of stitches in this area. What you want to do is one of two ways. Either stop short, boom, hit enter. Now I switch to my column tool, and I would digitize 2 points here, and then of course at the bottom. Now when I look at this, you can see that the thread stops here. It generates what we call a connector from here to the start of the satin stitch. If I walked right up to the start of it, I'm going to get 2 needle penetrations right here without any movement. Those are called zero motions, and we do not want those. The machine needs to keep moving. More important, like I say, in rayon than it is in polyester. So if I stop short, provided this is not a longer distance than I have when it comes to my trim under the tie tab, which is right here. You know, right here, this, it can't be longer than this or else it's going to trim because that's what it's told to do. But usually that's far less, and so that one stitch is going to keep things moving. The other way to do this is, I'll show you my favorite, is so say I'm walking, I do my underlay, I come all the way up to the top, press enter. Now when I start my column, I'm not going to start right here, I'm going to come down. It's only going to generate one stitch in that distance anyway, right? So here's 2 points, then I would finish down here, and I will hide the artwork so you can see. You see it generates, it walks up, and then it generates one stitch till it starts here. So that's going to keep things moving. So whether you stop short and let the column be the point, or you move all the way up and then start down, either way it's going to be a great looking point. Another thing that's very important to our benefit is if we look here, the column starts here, but look at, there's almost no density in right here. Yeah, if we look at that, that's like the third of the diameter of the needle. Oh. So we don't want any stitch. So Design Shop, under Properties, under the Advanced tab, we have filter parameters right here. So it says that I'm going to just filter out stitches that are less than 5 points. Remember, the needle is at least 7, so we don't want stitches that are, you know, half of that basically. Alright, so what it does is it will compare the distance, so it knows this is less than the 5 points, and it will generate every other stitch when it comes to the normal density until it gets wide enough where it is over the 5 points. This is exactly what you want. You can't have a lot of stitches in here. The machine will look like it's sitting in one place and pounding, and it's a terrific area for thread breaks. Alright. So let me turn back on the art, and I have one more example to show. This basically goes with all digitizing. I see this so many times in designs that come across my desk. It's very important that when you switch from element to element that you don't do it at the same exact point. So here's my walk stitch. Let's just say, for example purposes, I'm up here in the design and I'm going to walk down and walk over, and the big box is going to be a fill. So I would not want to click here, enter, start my fill at the same exact point, or I'm getting at least 2 stitches.
So same kind of similar thing as the
point.
As the point of the sunray, like you talked about.
Yeah.
Okay.
It just don't connect the points. I get it that people want to connect stuff together thinking that they're going to alleviate trims. That is so true, but not that close. Leave yourself
what,
10 or 20
points?
10 or 20 points.
10 or 20? Okay.
It is fine. The only time that can be a little bit of an issue is you scale something like, triple the size for a jacket back. Well, it's 2 millimeters distance on the normal size. You blow it to jacket back, it's going to try and trim probably. So always start or always finish up a little bit away from where you're going to start the next element. The machine and OS is set up that if it sees an exact zero motion stitch, it's going to filter it out. But if you are 1 point in either direction, it's got to leave that because we don't want to destroy designs. So know that that is very, very important, and especially when it comes to lighter threads like rayon and stuff like that. So another thing that I used to do, I used to when I would digitize for rayon, was increase the tie stitch length. Here again, we don't want to try and go down the same hole too many times, so I find 8 points works better with 40 weight thread than the normal default, which is 6. So everybody should know how to change that. Just go into properties, the tie tab. Once I select it, move this up. The new default tends to be style 1, 7 points with 3 stitches. All I want to do is move this distance up to 8. Tie off, it's good to go 8 again if you have the room. If you're doing very small letters, you got to still go with 6. All right. As far as densities go, they're really pretty much the same, like I said, as polyester. 30 weight thread, an average column, so let's say 2 millimeters would be average. There's very thin, borders and small letters. That's about 12 points. But say an average would be about 20. We're going to use 5/0 density when it comes to 30 weight thread.
So 30 weight thread is a heavier thread, right, Scott?
It is, yes. The lower the number, the thicker the thread. 40 weight, we all know, it's about 4/0 in general. 60 weight rayon, you have to move the density up because the thread is just so much thinner. So we're going to use towel-like densities, as I've mentioned before, of somewhere around 3.5 points.
Okay.
Okay, so on the machine, you want to explain some from here?
Yeah. So in general, let's kind of start by understanding where rayon thread got its start. At least what I believe, what I've been told by a lot of our elders through my years of embroidery. Basically, rayon thread got its start in commercial embroidery because when first commercial embroidery machines came out, there was no trimmers on the machines. And so you would have a multi-head machine, a 12-head machine.
I was there.
and an operator was responsible not only loading and unloading and fixing thread breaks and replacing bobbins, but when it would do a color change, they would have to go by and snap the previous thread so it wouldn't drag around and be caught into it. When I first got my start, I actually started on a non-trim type base machine, and so I would have to do that. And so rayon thread was weak enough that the operator could do that. If they tried to use polyester at the time, the polyester actually would eventually cut through the operator's finger, the skin, because the tensile strength, that strength that Scott was talking about, was too strong. So at the time when rayon and the non-trimmer type machines were around, normal operating speed of machines was between 4, maybe maximum 600 stitches a minute. You're really pushing it to get to that 600. And so one of the things that you want to do when running rayon thread on your Melco machine is make sure that that rayon thread really is not meant to go higher than about 900 stitches a minute. Now, I'm not going to tell you that I haven't ever seen someone running it. I actually saw a customer one time running at 1,500 stitches a minute with rayon thread, and they weren't getting a single thread break. But they were using a design that covered a lot of the stuff that Scott talked about. There weren't stitches on top of stitches. There was no zero motion. The densities were pretty wide open. And they really had their Actifeed setting set well. And so that leads me into my next point. I would make sure that if at all possible, let's say with polyester thread on a certain material that you're sewing, you would set your auto lower limit to, let's say, a 4. I would try to get that number to a 6 if your machine will not give you false breaks with it. The reason for that is it gives a little bit more thread into the system, and that will give it less stress or less tension on the thread, so we're not breaking that thread because, once again, rayon thread is weaker. We don't want any extra tension on the thread if at all possible. The other reason that we don't want to go faster, to just back up a second, is we're actually building up heat and friction on the thread as the needle travels through the material. And you probably heard me and you guys are going, oh my God, Mike's going to say it again. On the average stitch length, the thread is going to travel through the eye of the needle approximately 30 times. So with rayon thread, the friction inside between the material and the eye of the needle, that friction can build up, that heat can build up, and that can snap the rayon thread as well. So that's why we want to kind of bring our speed down just a little bit, and we want to take and make sure that we add a little bit in the active feed. Something else that'll help is if you've got something that you're sewing on that's got an abrasive back to it, and potentially even an abrasive top, on the back, let's say it's a cap that's got a very aggressive buckram, almost feels like wire. A lot of people say, well, why do I need to use backing on a cap when the cap is structured already? And the reason for it is the thread that's traveling through that eye is also going to travel against the back of the cap and the buckram, and that buckram can chew through thread like that too. So by having the cutaway or the tearaway cap backing below, it's got a soft material to travel against until it locks into place with the bobbin thread. So that's why you would want to do that. If it's got an aggressive top on it, that's where you might want to use a piece of solvay to give it something soft. So a lot of times people think of just solvay as a reason to fill in the nooks and crannies. It's also good to keep that smooth with the thread. So that's what I would look at. And feel free to jump in, Scott.
Yeah, so I sewed at 500, 550 for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I had a shop in Boulder in the 80s. That was the thread. That was the machine speed at the time. So, you know, I get a little frustrated with thread breaks, but I'm thinking now I'm going 900 stitches a minute. I mean, that is so much faster than we ever used to.
Yeah, almost twice as fast. Yeah.
Rayon has some nice benefits. It sits flatter than polyester. It's a far softer thread. I love it. I mean, I love the sheen. The twist is different, so the sheen is different. It bends tightly, so small lettering can really benefit from it. And a lot of times on the edges of satin stitches and stuff like that, it gives a crisper edge just because it's a softer, flatter thread.
Yeah. One point of thought I want to mention with Madeira thread.
I'm going to switch over.
No, it's okay.
All right.
When you're looking at the cones of thread from Madeira, you're going to notice that all the polyester-based threads are going to be on a gray cone. Anything that's a non-polyester thread is going to be on a white cone. You may not be able to see the color of the cone that I'm pointing at right now, but it's a really good way from a distance to be able to look at the machine and say, I've got polyester on the machine if all my cones are a gray color. And that's what I'm talking about, is the piece that sticks up out of the thread as it's spooled onto the cone, or the base itself. And then any non-polyester thread is going to be on a white. And also at the top, it's going to tell you. So another name for rayon is viscose. So some people get confused. Oh, I got viscose, I really wanted rayon. Viscose and rayon are one and the same. So don't get confused about the name. It is softer. You can actually feel the cone. Don't push very hard because you don't want to bruise the thread, but you can What was the old Charmin commercial?
That's exactly what I was going to say. In class, every class for 8 years that I've done, I pass around, here's a cone of poly, 40 weight, and a cone of rayon. Squeeze the Charmin.
Yes, don't squeeze the Charmin.
And it's unbelievable how much softer it is. It's just, polyester is a hard thread. Color fastness, I guess.
So color fastness, that's something that rayon thread did not have or does not have. Is in harsh environments like dry cleaning or harsh chemical cleaning of the garment, you can potentially get into fading of the thread color and or bleeding of the thread color. So an example of this, back in early days of my world here at Melco, I used to manage our accessory department, and I had a customer called in, and they had done white hats with red embroidery for a city for the 4th of July. And on the 4th, when everybody was wearing them at the parade, it had rained, and the red of the thread bled out over to the hat, and they were very upset. Well, come to find out, they didn't use the thread. At the time, it was the arc thread that Melco sold. They had used a cheap Asian knockoff version of rayon, and not only was it not color fast, but they hadn't cured the color, the dye into the thread, so it just ran out. So you got to be very careful with rayon and what kind of conditions you're going to, your customer is going to launder it in. You definitely wouldn't want to use it for patches for like uniforms and things like that.
Yeah, high bleach. And that
high bleach,
stuff.
exactly. Yep.
We, when I had the shop in Boulder, we did stuff for the Olympics because they're down in Colorado Springs, canoe and kayak team. So they did white jackets and one color hot red embroidery. It was a big star and flowing stripes and all this beautiful design.
Yeah.
So once we delivered it to them, they proceeded to put them on, go kayaking, get them all soaked, and then throw them into their bags and left them for days.
Oh.
So of course they ran. So the answer was, okay, we'll replace them, but first can you try washing them? And the solution to the problem was they washed them twice. That took care of the excess red that bled into the garment itself, and we didn't have to eat the jackets. So
just kind of a recap of rayon thread. Your design really doesn't need to be digitized different than you do for polyester. The points that Scott gave you on zero motion stitches or stitch over stitch, that really applies to polyester as well, right, Scott?
Exactly. You're just going to see more problems because of the weakness of rayon.
Right, and then just understand the application, not only what you're using the thread for or why you're using it, but what your customer is going to be doing with that product and how they possibly could be laundering it, so that you have a happy customer. Because most important thing is to give the customer as best quality as you possibly can, and you would hate to have everything perfect and the thread come back and get you. So just make sure that you ask those questions. If for some reason you want that rayon has got just a hair bit more sheen, today's polyester is pretty dang close, but it still has a softness or a sheen that polyester will never be able to get, just because of the the weakness of the thread is its weakness and its strength, because it just gives that very unique look that polyester could never meet. So just make sure if you decide to use rayon for an application that you ask the questions, or think about the questions. How might they launder this? Will bleach be introduced to it? Any harsh chemicals like dry cleaning chemicals? And if so, stay away from rayon. If not, try out rayon. It's really good. Madeira is, Melco is partnered with Madeira, but there's other thread manufacturers out there. And if you don't use Madeira, first of all, I would tell you to give it a shot. I think their threads are really good. But if you use other brands, check out their rayon threads as well and play around with it, right?
Yeah, just you might tell your customer, okay, you know, rayon is beautiful. One of the drawbacks is you need to dry the garment right after it comes out of the wash.
Yeah.
And really, that was one problem, this canoe and kayak team, that we had in 4 years of grind out 12 head production day and night. So it's really not too much of an issue, but be concerned. It fades in sunlight.
Fades in sunlight, and then one of the kind of the embroidery rumors that we've, if you've been around for a while, you've probably heard is the shelf life of rayon thread is not as good as polyester. It's hard for us to prove that. I think more importantly, it's not so much the shelf life that's important, but I think the rayon thread, because of its weakness, it's more acceptable to cold weather or too humid or sunlight or too dry of a condition, or you know, the drastics. You know, here in Colorado outside, we can have days it'll go from 20 degrees in the morning or colder to 75, 80 degrees in the afternoon. Not to say that's what happens inside, but I think that that's probably what gets to rayon thread more than that sitting in a good condition all the time. So once again, it's a kind of a finicky thread, but it can give you some really cool results if you need them.
It's just beautiful. Yeah, it's worth checking out. You know, they used to say it had about a 2-year shelf life. I'm sure it's longer now.
Yeah, you said you had a cone from the mid 80s, right?
Last week I was sewing some hats at home, and I had Madeira rayon. I gotta believe it's from the late 80s when I got started, and it's sewed at 900 on coarse hats. You know, 5 in a row. I look at the thread and it has "Made in West Germany" on it, right? So that shows you just how old it is before the wall fell and all that.
Right. One other question I have for you, Scott. So the rayon thread gives you a little bit tighter or crisper edge.
Yep.
The 40 weight rayon. Tell me, comparatively, from a 40 weight rayon to a 60 weight polyester, do you think the 60 weight polyester is as strong or stronger than the 40 weight rayon?
I do, because I can sew 60 weight, even 75 poly at over 900 stitches. You know, we just do repeat patterns of very teeny stitches to hand out at the shows and all.
So if I'm looking for that crispness, another option would be is going with a lighter weight polyester instead of going to the rayon, because I don't have the color safe issue or color fastness issues or the weakness of the thread issues like I do with rayon.
Yeah, you would have a little more stitches in the end, but it just lines up and it makes mitered corners and everything so crisp.
Cool.
Yeah, working with small ones.
Good. That was a question that came to mind. Let's see if anybody has got any questions. Looks like Cheryl Dunham posted, there's so many detergents that have hidden bleach and cleaning agents that I totally have gone away from rayon. Good point, Cheryl. So, you know, something to think about for sure is, you know, those harsh conditions. And once again, you strive for quality to give to your customer, just like Melco does for you guys. The last thing that you would want to do is have something that's out of your control, meaning the rayon and its color fastness, be a reason for an order of any size come back to you. So let's move on. Let's talk about firefighter thread.
Yeah, so firefighter, boy, this is a blessing, I tell you.
Yeah.
I used to do designs for race day suits and stuff like that, and there was no real true FR, you know, production thread, so we had no choice but to use Nomex. Nomex is what the actual garments are made from and stuff. Great for color fastness, not a lot of fun to embroider.
Pretty brittle and weak? Or?
It's thick, bulky, and very hairy, you know. The firefighter it's like a treated Nomex thread. So Madeira has one Firefighter is 40 weight. It's a little bit thicker than 40 weight, so cut your densities where you normally might use 4, you might use 4.2, 4.3, 4.5, depending on the garment. And definitely you have to move up the size of the needle to about at least an 80. I also like to increase the walk stitch lengths at least 25 points to 30 points. Again, you don't want to try and get the stuff to bend too tightly in too small of areas. Smallest lettering is going to be something like 0.3, 0.35 would be better. This is very popular now, this thread. People who work in the oil fields or, you know, race cars, all that. I'm sure there's several others.
Yeah. So what's interesting about this thread, if you haven't seen it, I'd suggest, typically, I believe we have some that come in the starter kit with the machines when you get them. But if you've, you know, long past got rid of that starter kit, I'm sure if you called Madeira and asked for a sample of the thread, they would get you one. But if you take and hold the thread down so that the thread is hanging down, and you take a lighter and light the tip of it, it will put itself out almost immediately. So it's almost like it's got a retardant built into the thread, where if you do that with rayon or polyester, it shrinks or shrivels, kind of like those little snakes that we used to play with in the 4th of July, right? So right. I don't know what is with the 4th of July. I'm missing warm weather here in Colorado.
Oh, man.
So yeah, it's really interesting. One thing that I would make sure though is, as you're using that, make sure that you're looking at the backing as well, because most backings are going to be have some kind of polyester based material mixed in or complete into the backing. So there is fire retardant backing out there,
and bobbins.
So make sure that you're getting the complete package with that fire retardant thread. So Scott, tell us a little bit about what we need to do digitizing wise for this firefighter type thread.
So I would either edit, you know, an existing design if it was digitized for polyester, and scale the densities. So I'm looking at column or satin densities that range, instead of maybe 3.8 to 4, I'm going to go 4.2 to 4.5. Just lighten it up because it is much thicker.
So closer to like a 30 weight thread than a 40 weight thread.
Yeah, like you know, what would you say, 35 weight, I guess, or something like that. Increase the walk stitch lengths to 25 to 35 points. It's going to be next to impossible to stitch really, really small letters because of the bulk of the thread. Again, like I've talked in the past, it's like using a Sharpie to write your name on a check, but make it look like your signature, no fair filling in letters. You know, you can kind of understand it has certain thickness to it.
Yeah.
You can add pull offset to your thin columns, again, through editing, either embroidery properties, if it's an OFM wireframe file, or through the scale. If it's an expanded design. You're going to have to take some liberties with this because it's only available in 23 different colors, but like I say, you can't believe how much better this is than not having a special machine production firefighter thread. Slow down the machine. 80 needle is definitely critical. And then, of course, we talked about the need for backing that's fire retardant as well as bobbins.
Okay.
Good?
Yeah, so with the thread, once again, you're going to notice that because it's not a polyester-based thread, on the Madeira side, the cones are going to be a white color instead of a gray color. So you can tell that it's not poly-based. The other thing is the name Burmilana is a Madeira branded polyester or branded thread. Other companies have fire retardant threads as well now. Once again, we highly recommend the Madeira products. I'm sure, once again, if you gave Madeira a call and asked for a sample of this, they would get you a sample out. but they have two different brands or two different versions of it, right?
Firefighter, though.
Oh, we're talking Firefighter.
Yeah, I do have one that's available over there. It looks the same. You can't really tell much difference other than the thickness. It's probably middle, bottom, maybe the blue. Squeeze it and you can't tell it's soft.
My bad. I went right for it. So this is the Firefighter. It is on a gray cone. So that's interesting.
It's expensive. That is one concern. But you can charge more if you're offering specialty threads to people in the oil fields or stuff like that.
Another good use of Firefighter thread, if it's not for the reason it would kind of bring us into the Burmilana.
Yeah.
If you're looking at doing something that gets that chenille look with the kind of the Berber loop or the loop effect with the Melco equipment, this thread has got a little bit more of a fiber feel to it instead of a real smooth feel to it like a polyester rayon has. This has got fibers that stick out from the sides. So this would be good to use for that Berber loop. And we'll be doing a Melco Facebook Live on the Berber loop, but that's another good use for this. It's kind of an in-between between the Burmilana thickness and a polyester. With this thread, I would be using a polyester. If it was for the Berber loop, I would use a polyester pre-wound. But once again, like Scott said, if it's for the fire retardant, make sure you get the fire retardant bobbins, and Madeira carries those as well.
Next is Frosted Matte. That's a unique thread, pretty cool, that Madeira has come out with. It is a ceramic core that's wrapped with polyester thread. It has a flat sheen to it, matte sheen. So really it's worth playing with. Different cells, and somebody might like, this year's logo to be flat instead of the normal polyester sheen. So because it's different, it's worth checking out. Really, as far as digitizing goes, it's a little bit thinner than 40 weight, so you might adjust your densities, increase them a little bit. Walk stitch length should be okay, because it's really not that different than 40 weight exactly. The kind of unique good property of it is for very small letters, the sheen in polyester thread can throw your eye off and make it look like the lettering is kind of distorted. You can see this especially if you use, say, black fabric and light gray thread for block letters.
Yeah.
The holes in the letters and all, just the sheen being different from one side to the other, throws your eye off. The flat part about this really makes the letters look crisper, so it's a good choice for small lettering, reasonably small, 40 weight small lettering.
Still, you would go with 60 weight if it was like super small stuff.
Very teeny, but it's a quick sub if you already have something that's for 40 weight and you're going to sew. Usually it's dark colors, light thread that you have the biggest problem, so worth checking out.
Any concerns of its strength compared to a normal poly 40 weight? Sometimes
it does shred, and so I like to slow down to about 1,000 instead of 11 or 1150.
Okay.
That's it. It's supposed to be really, really color fast, so if you have outdoor applications, it's worth checking out. And like I said, different is cool and different sells, so worth checking out.
Cool.
Okay, next we'll move on to the wool combo threads, Burmilana and Burmilana cotton. There's some cool things that can happen in this. I will open a design. I have that.
Yeah, and got another question while you're bringing that up, Scott.
Alrighty.
A question was, what about winding your own bobbins for specific colors? What's your thoughts on self-wound bobbins?
The only time I've done wound my own bobbins is on very thin thread, 60 and really 75 weight, because it's almost impossible to not get a bobbin pull if your satin stitch on 75, you know, is like as wide as the needle.
Yeah.
So we take the top thread and wind it poly for the bottom so that you get no bobbin pull.
Okay.
Cost usually stops people from doing it in this country, but overseas they do it quite commonly. What do you have on it?
Well, so my points on it would be is be aware of the bobbin spool itself. So if you're using a metal bobbin spool, you may have to get a backlash spring and put into the bobbin case. And the reason for that is that metal spool is heavier. And so when the machine goes to stop to do a trim, that metal bobbin spool will have a little bit more inertia to it and will make it overspin, which can cause either the bobbin thread to, when it's trimmed, pull back into the bobbin case and pull out of the tongue that holds it, or it can cause it to overspin and get, when it does a trim, the trim will miss because the tension on the bobbin itself, the thread, is not tight. Nate here, part of our applications team, he'll take the old Neb plastic bobbin case or spools, and he'll keep those, and he does self-wind on those. The cost to do it, efficiencies, I would say it's not too good. There's some of the bobbin manufacturers are starting to do quite a bit of color options.
Yeah, 10 colors, I think, for Nebs.
Yeah, so it can be done. Just be aware, and especially if the bobbin is not wound correctly, you can get quite a few issues with either thread breaks caused from the thread being set over itself and trying to pull up, causing a thread break. Could even cause a needle break, to be honest with you. So yes, you can use you can wind your own bobbins, but they really need to be done correctly and be aware of that metal bobbin spool.
Yeah, sometimes, let's say high-end towels, so you're doing a big monogram and it's, burgundy thread or something. So you're going to see the back of the towel on a left chest or hat. You usually, don't see the inside. Some people wind their own bobbin for that. If you use know that normal bobbin thread is 80 or 90 weight, very thin, 70 to 90 weight. So if you wind your top thread to match, you're going to get far less stitches out of a bobbin, something like 15, I think, versus 45 or 50. But you can't really tell the back from the front when you look at it because it's all the same thread color. So yeah, there's some definite reasons to do it. It's just not so common.
Cool.
Here.
Sorry about that. Let's move on.
Good break. All right. Yep. So Burmilana is 12 weight thread. So we're talking cable. You can sure sew it fast because you have roughly a quarter, a third of the stitches. So densities must be drastically opened up. We're talking like column densities from 9 to 12 points instead of 3 to 5 or 4.5 points here. If I show you this one in 3D and we zoom in, you go, oh, that's no way that's going to ever cover. But the thread is just so completely thick, it does cover. You can add a wow factor. You can get a hand-done look with something like this. The Burmilana thread is actually 50% acrylic, 50% wool, and they've come out with Burma CO, which is wool and cotton. They both give like a hand embroidered look. You can use it for some super cool effects on flowers and the micro chenille and stuff like that we talked about. So other than densities being opened up drastically from 9 to 12 points, our walk stitch length's going to need to be somewhere around 30 points because too tight, you can't do it. The most important thing that I've seen in the past problems with it is people just use the normal default tie stitches. That's not going to work. That is so much the same hole because this thread is so thick it's going to take 100 needle to get it through the eye, inside the eye of the needle. So walk stitches should be at least 1 millimeter or 10 points. and you really got to be careful there also with the lock stitches. The tie out stitches are going to need to be about a millimeter. So here's one that I did just a sample to show, and so if I look at it, you can see that my walk stitches are like 30 points, and if I go into a satin stitch, here I'm at 9.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, they're drastically increased, but wow, talk about a wow factor. There's one other sample. Oh, we just goof around sometimes with new thread around here. This is one that I did to test out where you cut the back side of it.
Oh, okay.
I've done that.
Yeah.
So basically, this is a satin stitch that's 12 density that has random edge, so that's why they're not even along the outer border. So it will sew a satin stitch this direction, but it's very open. And after it does the satin, you can see that I did a walk stitch twice around because I need to like lock this portion in place, because what I'm going to do after it's all done, flip it over, cut the bobbin, and then flip it back. You can pull the wool thread forward, you can trim it, make it, it's a true 3D thing.
Oh,
sticking
that's cool.
to you. Yeah. So try that. It's so easy to do. Shouldn't take you more than a couple minutes to set it up.
So on the embroidery machine with this, I think Scott had mentioned it, we don't want to run faster than about 900 stitches a minute, right, Scott?
Yes, definitely.
This thread has a little bit more kind of girth to it, I guess is a good way to put it. It's just thicker, and so as the thread comes off of the cone, when we're going down through itself, like we do with the Melco system, the thread will actually catch on itself as it's coming off the cone. So one thing that you might want to do is you may want to play with, if we can move to the full screen.
Alrighty.
And I'm going to just take one cone off here. So one thing we can do is, as we put the cone on, we can pull this plastic tube up, and so what that'll do is, as the thread comes off, that tube will take and release some of the tension on the thread as it pulls off of itself. The other thing that you can do is you can play with, like Nate does this quite a bit, is he'll have a spool holder on the wall, and then from the ceiling he'll have like a paper clip, one of the large gator clip type looking things, and it'll come down and feed into it, so it has a chance to pull off the cone this way. So you may have to get a little bit creative on this thread. The other thing is make sure that you increase, I'll go anywhere from 2 to 4 points more on the ActiFeed to accommodate for the ActiFeed system to pull that off of off the spool. In that case, you may have to look at turning off bobbin detection when using this. You'll just have to gauge that as you use it, but it can give you some really cool looks, kind of like that micro chenille that we were talking about, or we've used in the past, Fancy Stitch Name, the variety of that. So once again, check out this thread, and sometime in the near future we'll try to get some designs up on these different threads. We don't have them quite ready for this this session, but we'll get them up and post it and let you guys know about it.
All right.
And last but definitely not least.
Well, I have one more for.
Oh, okay.
Let me make sure I'm in a good place. All right, I'll switch it back.
Maybe spin it, turn it down just a little bit. It's good for your head, but I'm not quite as tall, so there we go.
A little more? Okay.
No, that's perfect.
This doesn't want to sit up here. It's not a problem.
Technical difficulty. Sorry, guys. There we go. We're good.
Okay, so the other problem that I've had using it is you got this 100 needle, which it takes because you've got the large eye. It still can be ferocious trying to jam the thread, even with a fine, clean point that you've cut with scissors, into that. The reason is the wool fibers stick out sideways. So my analogy there is it's like trying to put a cat in a bathtub, you know. They just spread their legs out like,
or a
no
kitchen
way.
sink. Huh?
Oh, yeah. So the trick that works really well there is to take a piece of your normal polyester 40 weight, let's say, tie your square knot or whatever knot you use on that, thread the polyester, and then it's pretty simple to pull the knot through the 100 needle.
Okay.
If it doesn't go through straight, then always back up and come down at an angle, because we have elongated eye and you'll get better choice
Good
there.
Good point.
And the last one is you need to have a good supply of canned air or a compressor, because after several runs your bobbin is going to have a beard. And so we'll just blow it all out.
So down in the hook area is going to be pretty fuzzy, huh?
Yes, and no bleach in washing or peroxide or anything like that when it comes to this. The only other issue would be maybe the retaining finger. So if you go, I don't know how we.
I think that for now, so
it's on Melco service.
Yeah, so we'll post a link on retaining finger and setting that retaining finger, but because we're using a larger needle and the thread is thicker, that retaining finger might need to be just a hair bit looser, is what Scott's talking about,
right,
for that thread to pass through the retaining finger around the bobbin. So I'll post that. We caution you because you can do damage to the machine if you open up that retaining finger too much. So
definitely
don't do it unless you know for sure what you're doing first.
All right, and then last is metallic. So metallic comes in a lot of different thicknesses, and this gets back to what we started saying, is don't just sub metallic 40 weight in a design that's done for 40, because it's thicker and it's far more finicky. It can add a huge wow factor to your embroidery. It's thicker, so here are my recommended densities. If you have 30 weight metallic, use somewhere around 5-point density, around a 30-point walk stitch length. Thinner thread 40, we go about 4.5 density and about 25 points on the walk stitch length. And really worth checking out is their 50 weight thread. Density is about 4, so it's still up, and walk stitch is about 20. 50 weight thread a lot of times allows you to do what we said is a problem. Take metallic, throw it in a 40 weight. If you go down to 50 weight metallic, it a lot of times will just sub in a 40 weight polyester application.
Okay.
So it can add a wow factor. Here's one that I did in the past. I just wanted to show you. What's really cool on this is silver metallic. I've used that on a lot of different sprint cars, race cars, motorcycles, engines, that kind of stuff. So we did all of what you see in gray here was actually silver metallic, and then I even used red metallic to do sort of a similar flake paint job around the red of it. And this one comes out really looking good. I mean, it makes things look far more realistic.
So what's up with that big black block over the side?
Well, it was a certain logo I didn't want to show on public TV. So here's another one that we did. If you've been to shows this last year, you've seen this one. We do a multimedia bag thing. And point here is all the stars are gold metallic, and all these two semicircles or whatever are silver metallic. So we actually just went and used the 50 weight for this. So if I highlight this, you can see we used 4.0 density, even though it's 50 weight thread for this entire semicircle and the one on the outside. Then when it comes to the stars, I used 4.7 density.
Can you zoom in on some of those rays of those stars so we can see how?
Sure.
It's pretty interesting how you digitize those. Instead of coming left to right all the way in, you kind of go from the point to one side and kind of weave back in. They came out great.
Yeah, there is custom shapes right here, and there are. I gave 3 stars. I forget which one this is in. Common symbols. So here I've done 3 different stars. Stars can be a challenge. So there's a very small star, which basically is a column run in the same direction. But you get into a little bigger size, it's nice to be able to change the direction of the stitching to let the light play off of it.
Yeah.
And then there's a large one right here. So this actually came from the medium star. So
oh, cool.
Everybody out there has this. You can throw a couple of stars down, try them, see how they went.
I didn't know that. Nice.
Okay, so metallic. We already talked about the densities. As far as embroidering is kind of where we are now. Well, one thing you need to be concerned on, I've found that if metallic, it does have a shelf life, and if it's been sitting around too long, when you pull out the start of it, if it's really coily, maybe it's been sitting around for 5 or 8 years or something, it could be past its prime.
Yeah, and we had a comment on the pulling up the plastic tube.
Mm-hmm.
If the thread needs to relax, any thread, including metallic, needs to relax a little bit more, meaning uncoil before it gets down to the needle, you can always use that tube to pull up to get that relax a little bit also.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to slow the machine down. Whenever you have trouble, that's going to be important. 800-900 stitches is fine. We move one size up in needle. That's important because the larger the needle, the larger the eye. The thread goes through there, like Mike said, 30 times, and so the larger and less restricted the thread is, the better success we're going to have. So move one size up in a needle. Madeira recommends changing to a new needle when you put metallic on there. Really? That's interesting. I didn't know. There's all sorts of tricks that people use to sew metallics with styrofoam cups to unwind the thread they put over it and hang it. Yeah, there's crazy stuff from the 80s, I guess. So the other thing though is metallic can be scratchy, so it's pretty well suited for bags, for backpacks, for coats, and especially for hats. On left chest, you could do it. It's just a good practice would be Madeira, all the others. They sell a
kind of a fusible
cover. Yeah, it says hot melt glue on one side. It's super soft or soft something. And you basically, at the end of the embroidery, after you say cut your cutaway out, then you put a rectangle or a square or whatever of this on the inside, heat press it, and it's soft then forever.
Awesome.
That's good for older people and younger people. Don't like the scratchiness of embroidery. Sometimes people use it even on just kids' clothes and stuff like that.
Metallic threads, Scott, it's a bad idea to use metallic threads with any kind of adhesive on the backing. So be it a adhesive tearaway or you lightly spray adhesive the backing on. And the reason for that is if you looked at the metallic thread under kind of a microscope, it almost looks like barbed wire. Mm-hmm. And so that the pieces sticking out will go through, like the 30 times that it goes through the eye of the needle, that barbed wire part will go through, grab the adhesive, pull it up and gum up the eye of the needle almost within 100-200 stitches, and you'll start getting thread breaks that fast. So if you have to use the adhesive backing, cut out the area or don't put adhesive in the area where the metallic is going to go down.
That's a good point, yeah. Metallic is very elastic, very stretchy. You could pull it like crazy. So sometimes can tend to drive certain trimmer crazy. There is a special metallic trim setting on the XTS.
Yes.
From some of our machines from the past. Current one doesn't need a different special trim setting, but that can help your success better.
Cool.
And again, don't just sub metallic where 40 weight poly is, unless you're going down a weight, because they need to be taken care of.
Okay.
That's what we have for you today, unless you've got more.
The only thing I have is if you're watching this video after the fact, it's pre-recorded. We'll put it up on YouTube and Facebook. If you have questions, please post them in the comments. Even after this has been done being live, we'll go back and answer the questions for this. So thank you for watching from Scott and I and Melco here in Denver. Thank you very much and have a great day.
All right, take care. We'll see you next time.